Welcome you to our talks on Tuesday for November. It is noon, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dana Childress, and I am an early intervention professional development consultant with the Partnership for People with Disabilities at VCU. I'm on our state's professional development team, and I'm really happy to be working with Tracy Walters as our presenter today. I'll turn it over to Tracy in just a second to introduce herself. Today, we're talking about a topic that I've wanted us to talk about for a couple of years, and I think it's become even more relevant with the pandemic the last year and a half. We're going to talk about digital distractions, and I'll be honest, as I've been working with Tracy on this and thinking about it and reading the information she's given us, I'm like, that's the perfect word for it. I feel so distracted all the time, and particularly during the pandemic. She's going to talk to you about what was a new term to me, which is technoference. That was one I wasn't familiar with. So if that's a new term for you, you're going to learn all about it today. And then the intersection between technoference, digital distractions, and those parent-child interactions that we all know they're so important for development. I also want to thank, we have Corey Hill and Lisa Terry here on our team. They're backing us up, and Seth Buffkin did a beautiful job on the slides, and he's here backing us up as well. So I guess we will go ahead and turn it over. Tracy, if you'll go ahead and advance the slide, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and get us started.
All right. As Dana said, I'm Tracy Walters. I am the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Coordinator for the state of Virginia. I'm so happy to have this platform. I want to thank all the partners who have been involved in the project and really supporting this kind of platform so that we can all keep exchanging our ideas and getting information out to one another, really to support the work that we do with the children and families every day. So I'm going to go ahead and move on into the presentation for you guys. I want to kind of give you an origin of thought of where I'm coming from with this presentation and why I was interested in doing it. Touch pointing on what Dana just said, I think for many of us, whether you're an early interventionist, you're an educator, you're a mental health professional, whatever discipline you're coming from, I think that we're keen observers, and that's almost a requirement for what we do. But I'm just going to share a quick experience with you. In my previous work, I worked as the site director for VCU Health Systems Family Care Services Unit. And about 15 years ago, part of my role and part of my favorite role was really to come out and greet all the children and families. We had about 200 families in our center. And then it was children, infancy, 6 weeks through 6 years of age. And so we would greet the parents in the morning in the reception area and just make sure everybody was getting off on the right foot. And that's always a bustling time, as you guys know, who work with young children, you know what it looks like. Sometimes they're barely getting through the door. You can see all kinds of things going on. And this one particular morning, I had a dad come in and he had his baby like on his hip. And he was talking on his cell phone, and he was really absorbed in this conversation of, you could tell it was work related. And these were all medical professionals, and he was really kind of in that conversation. But his baby was on his hip and was trying to communicate back to dad. It was very interesting to observe that and to watch that play out. The baby was reaching for him, tapping his shoulder, grabbing at the phone, really turning the head to try to get that in-face, that face-to-face activity going with dad. And it really wasn't happening. And like I said, this was many, many years ago. And I just thought, what? How is the baby interpreting that right now? Like, this baby has to be confused about who is dad communicating with, if not to them. So that was the origin of my thought when I came to look at this presentation. So today we're going to go over several learning objectives and outcomes and intentions for you. The concept of what technoference is. Technoference as a disruptor in the parent-child dyad, impacts of technoference on the development of the child, what technoference looks like in daily rituals and routines with children, and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on technoference. So let's start to pull this apart. I'm going to get you busy now. It's going to be a very creative and fun way to work together. So Seth, if you would launch the poll for us, I want you to take a look, and I'm going to give you some simple directions to participate in the poll. If it doesn't work for you, you can just put your answer in the chat. But which statement most closely defines technoference for you? And then here are your choices. The ability to create work-life balance in a digital world without causing interference in your work schedule. That would be A. B is technology that can cause a disruption in relationships. Or C, a new platform for working with children and families digitally. So again, if you're not familiar with the term, which statement most closely defines technoference? A, the ability to create work-life balance in a digital world without causing interference with your work schedule. B, technology that can cause a disruption in relationships. Or C, a new platform for working with children and families digitally. I see we're getting lots of answers in the poll here. Still a few coming in. Okay, so I think we can end the poll and share the results. And so the answer is B, technology that can cause a disruption in relationships. I might have just given you a small tip on the slide before. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and let's hear a little more about technoference.
It's a term that deals with the everyday, very minor sorts of intrusions and interruptions that our technology devices may elicit.
McDaniel and his team studied 170 families with kids aged 5 years or younger. They found parents who had a harder time managing their own phone use were more likely to also have technoference occurring in their relationship with their child. Greater technoference was also linked to worse behavior.
Then what we also saw is they were seeing more problem behaviors in their child. So their child was more likely to be acting out or hyperactive or crying or something like that.
McDaniel suggests creating tech-free zones or times. These can be when parents are putting their child to bed or during meal times. Family members can stack their phones or put them in a basket when entering these zones. Putting these devices away can help ensure that parents are spending quality time.
Great. So that's just another reaffirmation of what technoference is. Here's another opportunity to play. So again, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go up to that view options and go down to annotate. And this time you're going to go to your stamp tool and stamp the answer that you think answers the question for us. On average, parents and caregivers spend blank amount of hours a day on their devices in the presence of their child. So I'm going to read that again as we think through it together. On average, parents and caregivers spend blank hours a day on their devices in the presence of their child. Is it 1, 3, or 7? I see the answers populating here on the screen. And I think we can, looks like we have a lot of answers in. So the answer is 3. So 3 hours a day in the presence of our children is on average what parents and caregivers are spending with their children while they're on their technology. And I will say your technology can be your phone, it can be a tablet, it can be gaming, it can be your laptop or your home computer. So we know technology comes in lots of different forms. Here's another time for us to play together. Think about this one. Again, you're going to use your stamp tool for this. If you have a difficult time, you can just type it in the chat. According to research carried out by Boston Medical Center, blank percentage of parents observed in restaurants used a mobile device continuously while dining out with their children. So think about the times you've been out to dinner, although now it may be on patio eating scenario. But let's see, I see the answers coming in. I see hearts and stars, all kinds of things. I'm going to read through it one more time for us. According to research carried out by Boston Medical Center, blank percentage of parents observed in restaurants used a mobile device continuously while dining out with their children. I see answers still coming in. You guys are really thinking through this one. Think about what you've observed or witnessed if you've been out, or maybe with your own families. Couple more coming in. Okay, looks like we've kind of come to a stop, so let's see what the result is. 73%. 73% of parents have been observed using their technology continuously when you're out to dinner with your children and your family. That's a really high percentage when we think about how long it takes to even eat a meal. So go on. So Radesky, who is another one of the lead researchers in this project, her team found that caregivers most absorbed in their devices were the ones who were most likely to respond in a blank manner to their child. Again, you're going to use your stamp tool for this one as well. Radesky's research team found that the caregivers most absorbed in their devices were the ones who were most likely to respond in a blank manner to their child. And I see lots of answers coming in. Got some for distracted. We have some for harsh. Still coming in. I see lots of X's and stars. You guys are really thinking this through. Still a few coming in. Okay, it's slowing down a bit. Okay, let's take a look and see what the result is for that one. Harsh. This is one of the things I found most interesting in reading the research about this topic. When you do a deep dive into the materials that are out there, one of the things they say is that parents who get really absorbed, even more than frequency, the absorption of how parents are really into whatever they're doing on their technology devices, whether it's work or play, entertainment, organization, when they come out or when they are interrupted or asked for a child asks for attention, their response tends to be more harsh. So it's really looking at that transition of sorts of a family member, a caregiver trying to come out of where their mind is in that technology and get transitioned back to what is happening in their present. And I find that very interesting. And I find it also with lots of potential consequences for young children. So there are like three major concepts we really want to continue to look at as we're going through the presentation. Technoference has been really laid out nicely for us in that it is interruptions in communication and interference that's caused by attention being paid to our technology devices. So it's that competing interest of being on your technology and also being needed by your child, partner, or other relationship. One of the other concepts that we really want to be looking at when we're thinking about young children and how parents are interacting when using their technology is attachment. And what happens with the attachment? We all know in the disciplines that we're coming from, that is something that we think about on the daily. what is this attachment looking like for this child in this family, in the context of the family? So attachment is, just as a reminder, is that emotional bond that forms between that infant and caregiver, or child and caregiver. And it's the way the child gets their needs met. It's like this built-in security. It's the way a parent attaches to a child that really lets them feel safe and secure, and know that when they cry out, their needs will be met. Okay, it's that serve and return that we're all very familiar with. Now, attunement is also something that we really have to think about in terms of this research. Attunement is different than attachment. It's more about how responsive, not in the way that that parent is responding, but how is that response? So where attachment makes a child feel safe and secure, attunement makes a child feel valued and needed. So it's not just about, I would give the example of, it's not that you pick a baby up, but it's how you pick the baby up. You pick the baby up slowly, you look at the baby, you talk to the baby. It's about your tone of voice and your tone of relationship. So attunement is also critically important in the development of the child, as is attachment, and especially in terms of how technology may be interrupting that. And then neurodevelopment. I really, not being a brain scientist or a specialist, but I think we can all agree how critical neurodevelopment is for young children. And if you have or have not read the book that was published now many years ago, Neurons to Neighborhoods, that was the first time the rubber really met the road in terms of pushing neuroscience and neurodevelopment in terms of early childhood development. And it really pushed forward funding for research and education, because we really learned a lot about neurodevelopment in that piece of literature. This is a term referring to the neurological pathways that really influence all of the important performance functionings of the brain: your intellectual functioning, your reading ability, social skills, your memory, your focus, your attention. So when we think of executive functioning, which has become a more recent term and a hot button term, when you think about that executive functioning, that's all from the neurodevelopment, right? And we know that children need to have like those executive functioning skills in place to be successful, both as young children and then as they grow and they go into other educational arenas. So let's just take a look at what it may look like, you know, technointerference and the impact on the neurodevelopment of the child. So look at this with me now.
Everyone in a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What we are biologically prepared and waiting for.
I'm sorry, let me start that over for you guys.
Everyone in a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get, what we are biologically prepared and waiting for, which is input from those around us.
It's this back and forth serve and return interaction that literally shapes the architecture of the brain.
Serve and return begins when a child looks at something or observes something, makes an utterance, and that represents the serve. And the return is when the parent notices the child doing these things and responds to the child.
Under conditions where serve and return is broken, you literally are pulling away what is the essential ingredient of the development of human brain architecture.
It was a really compelling series of experiments where they started by videotaping the mother and the baby engaging in cooing and smiling. And then they asked the mother to basically put on a blank face and not respond at all. When a baby is not attended to, that is a sign of danger to the baby biologically. So the stress systems become activated.
In a brain that is constantly bathed in stress hormones, not that's up and down, that comes with normal development, certain key synapses, the connections between nerves, fail to form, and critical regions of the brain.
So neglect both fails to provide the stimulation that's needed to develop the basic architecture.
So just watching that video, first of all, it's heartbreaking. I don't know how the mom does that experiment, but you know, when it stops really proving the point, I will stop using it. We know that research is older, but just thinking about how this could also emulate that experience of the parent on their device, whatever that may look like, and the child, just as this infant, was trying to get that parent's attention. And you can see the immediate distress of what is happening for that child internally, emotionally, and cognitively when they're not getting that serve in return. So really what we're talking about is not only are we seeing those external signs, but as Ed Tronick and his team are just describing to us, it literally changes the brain architecture when that serve and return is not consistently met. And I think we can all justify or say to ourselves, well, I'm only on my phone for X amount of time, whatever that may be. But sometimes we lose track when we're on our devices. And I think being aware and being able to share the awareness with families that we're working with is so important and so critical in their children's development. So I want you to take a look at this scene. This could be something that, you know, you're seeing at any point now, you know, as you go to a park. Thank goodness we're at least getting to the point where we can be outside with our children. And I want you just to take a look at what is happening here. Just absorb what you're seeing in the photo. I see a child in the back. Looks like there's some sand play going on, a bucket. It's a beautiful day. I see mom, she's on her phone, looking at her facial expressions, her body language. And now I want you to, based on that observation and what you were looking at in this photo, I want you to type a one-word response that describes what you feel could be disrupted or is missed in this parent-child relationship or dyad, just in this one scene that we're observing. You can just dump it in the chat. Attention, good. Language, attention, definitely. Distraction, engagement, yes. Interaction, bonding, play. Yeah, play is a big one, right? Because play is the work of the child. Ignoring, fun, opportunity, observation, good. Observation, good. Engagement. Okay, yeah, it's slowing down. Yeah, those are some really good points that you guys bring. Play is a huge one, that bonding again. Play is a huge one because that is the work of the child, and we learn so much both from the disciplines that we're in, but even as parents. For those of you who are parents or an aunt and an uncle or grandparent, you know how much you learn about that child and their development and where they are just by observing them, watching them play, being engaged in that. So thank you for participating. So now we're going to go to thinking about implicit bias and how this might be intersecting in our work our discipline and however we're intersecting with families and children and in those relationships. So I would venture to say that most of us have spent our entire lives both studying early childhood education or early intervention, social work, all the disciplines that we are coming from. And we have spent probably an equal portion of our time in that work. And so we have one viewpoint of how things are and what impacts development and why parents do the things they do. And so this is an opportunity for us to check our own biases. Now, one thing as an educator that I know I learned, and most of you guys are going to be very familiar with this, is talking about the child's invisible backpack, right? We often talk about when a child comes into a classroom or when a child is in childcare, they come to that classroom with their invisible backpack. And that is all the things that they're carrying with them that's happened to them in their life in general, also in their home that morning, in the car, with their parents, with their sibling. All of the things that make up that child's experience comes in that invisible backpack. But what is in our invisible backpack? We spend less time thinking about that. And I think whenever we're talking about bias, this is a great time to do a self-check. And I think it's important that we do that and come from a lens of recognizing whatever bias we may have every time we enter in to the work that we're doing with children and families. So looking at the same photo, same scene, what I would like you to do is take a moment and I want you to wonder why this mom may be choosing to have this moment alone. Why might she choose to be on her mobile device instead of doing something else at the moment? Just throw it into chat. Connecting with a relative she hasn't talked to or interacted with in a while. Joint attention. I'm sorry, that's from the other one, I think. She needs an adult break. Yes. Downtime. Kid is happy, so she's fine. Taking a break. Husband. Making an appointment. Husband is safe in Iraq. Yeah, right. Baby is content, so she can catch up with social media or text, just taking a moment to herself. Maybe the only time she's had a free time connecting with someone. Child is engaged. Yeah, right. So lots of things come into play, right? When we're parents, we're not just a parent. We're also a wife. We're also a sister. We're also an employee. We play many roles in our lives, whether it's a mother or a father at the park with the child. We all play many roles. And so there's lots of things competing for our attention, right? So maybe that was a critical moment for her. Maybe that was a critical moment that she be able to have that, whether she's had a very sad and distressing day. Maybe she did need to know someone got somewhere safely so that then she could return to her child and be wholly present. But really taking that moment to look at both sides of this. Yes, what we know is good and right for the child, but also looking at what our biases might be that we're bringing into that relationship. So I think always make sure that you're looking from a lens and really doing a self-check-in about what bias you may bring to the table. So again, we're just going to reiterate here with that attachment and attunement. Attachment makes that child feel physically safe and protected, and attunement makes that child feel valued. Both are equally important in the development of that child, and it's important for us to key into and help parents bring awareness to the parents as we're looking at this issue with families. Now, here's an example of the impact on attachment, and this photograph really captures my attention. Parents who use their phones during parent-child interactions are less sensitive and responsive, both verbally and non-verbally, to their child. So in both ways, even when their children are really trying to get their attention, there's lots of bits for the attention, the quality of the parent-child interaction is actually lowered. So if you just look at this one snapshot of this dad and the baby, the baby has really discovered something here. The baby has really discovered that there's a string from the basket, okay? This is a big discovery for a young child. What do you think could be missed here? You can drop it in the chat. What do you think dad might be missing an opportunity to do in this situation with the child? The child has materials there. The child is like observing that there is something different that is happening with the material when they're manipulating it. I'd just love to hear from you. What do you think potentially could be missed here? Shared interaction, serve and return, encourage, exploration, labeling with language, yes. Child's curiosity, helping those fine motor skills. Good. Yeah, so there's lots of missed opportunities just in this one short interaction, right? And I think that a lot of time, as we're thinking about time with our own children or time with children in families that we're working with, we look at the big things, right? We look at the first toddler gymnastics class, and we're really honed in on that, and we're probably videotaping that. Or we're looking at the first Pee-wee baseball game, or we're looking at these first events. But there's so many events in between these so-called big events. This is the gold mine. This is the important thing. There's so many missed opportunities there for vocabulary, serve and return, excitement about a discovery that the child made. And with attention paid to that, that learning goes so far beyond this one simple interaction. Sorry. Again, when we look at that attunement, I think one of the things that is key to remember is that this is disrupted rapport between the parent and the child. So you have lack of communication. I think children have a hard time really interpreting the parent's affect. If you're trying to do two things at one time, in this slide, you can see this child, she really just wants mom to play. Like, come on, mom, right? We're just really trying to get mom's attention. And I think realizing that children have a harder time interpreting our body language and our affect when we're on our technology than they normally would if we're focused and attuned to what their needs are. And when then that is happening for a child, it's hard for them to think that they are being understood or valued. Key to remember. Let's take another brief look at the research here. This is Dr. Rudetsky that we had mentioned earlier.
So technoference was a term developed by my co-author and collaborator, Brandon McDaniel. He's a psychologist who's at Parkview Research Center in Indiana. So he gets the credit for that term, but he coined that term in trying to capture a research measure that's not just about how much is the parent using technology or how much is the child using technology, but what's happening with the relationship. And so it became a question.
So I think that is a key difference when we're looking at this particular topic. It's what is happening in the in-between in that relationship between that use of technology. What is being lost or not attended to when we are using the technology that's available to us. And with that, we really start to think about where do we think that technoference shows up in the daily lives and routines and rituals of young children? So when we look at that, there's three major places that we may turn to. So when we think about routines and rituals with children, we think about eating, sleeping, and playing, right? This is the work of the young child. And so I would say in our culture, for the majority, in our communities, it takes two working parents to really make the finances work and to provide for our families. And so if we looked at a typical day of a family, and let's say the family worked 8 to 5, and let's say things are starting to return to normal. So our child is in school, thankfully, hopefully, and they're also back in childcare. So if we're working 8 to 5, we go to pick our child up. We have a brief time in the car, right? And then we're usually home by 6. So what do we have to cram in to that 6 o'clock hour, right? What are we looking at in terms of the time that we have? So we have to give them some dinner, we have to give them a bath, and we have to get them to bed. If we're lucky, they're going to get to go outside and play. We just had a time change. That makes it a little more difficult when you're getting home that late, right? But if we were to think about, we only have, let's say 6 to 9 o'clock, or even earlier for the littlest ones, and we only have 2.5, 3 hours at home with our children, waking hours in the evening. And the slide earlier told us that we spend 3 hours a day in the presence of our child on our technology. What does this look like? What does this look like for our children? Also, what does it look like for us as a parent in our relationship with our child? And childhood is fleeting. They're not going to be little forever. It's going to pass. So really banking on the time that we do have is so critical. So let's look at what the translation might be for children if we're thinking about how our schedules are, how much time we have, and then how much are we trying to balance that time that we do have with technology use. Look at this video with me. So I find that video pretty powerful in thinking about this topic and thinking about working with families, with children, and what this might look like, and for our own families and what it might look like. And I would say, at least my experience is that I've seen all these scenarios. There was nothing in this video that was new to me that I had not seen and experienced firsthand. So it's pretty prevalent in our society. So let's just take a moment to talk about like some contributing factors to technoference, because I do think it's important, again, looking at our own bias and looking at what we're bringing to this topic, but also looking at what causes this, right? We always want to know, well, here's what it is, but what is causing it? So COVID-19, yes, we've kind of laid that out. It has, I don't think, created this situation for families and children, but I think it has exacerbated this situation for children and families. Social media, right? So I've had a lot of people talk about, well, you know, I don't really use Facebook, but social media includes so many different things, right? It could be Facebook, it could be Instagram, it could be CNN, it could be anything that you're using on your phone that is causing that absorption that we are talking about in terms of social media use. It could also be text, right? It could be a text that you're sending. It could be an email, just in your use of your phone altogether. Multitasking, right? So organizational tools. Type in the chat for me one thing that you could think of that you use on your phone to help keep you organized. Because I think this is one of the things that happens for children and families also. We are trying to multitask many, many things, okay? We have a lot going on at work. We have a lot going on in life. calendars, lists, notepad, yes, task reminders. How would we live without them, right? How would we live without these tools? Email, notes, and calendars, yes. We live by these tools just to keep us in the right place, make sure we're not forgetting anything, and really thank you for participating. And also just to enhance our own performance. Work family responsibilities. I can name one big one right now, right? We're all using our phones to get those vaccine appointments for our children, right? Or we used it to get our own vaccine appointments. But we also use them for doctor's appointments, right? We use them for all kinds of things that we need to make sure that we get to. Again, you guys mentioned like those calendars and notes. That's so important when you don't want to miss something that is perhaps related to your child. And sadly, to occupy our children, okay? Here's one that, you know, we need to be aware of, and we need to be able to give strategies to support families when this is happening. Sometimes we're using our phones or our technology, excuse me, which grows the interest for our child. They also want to use it. So oftentimes, instead of like debating about it, we just give them the technology. And I think we need to stop and think, is that a message we want to send? Is that how we want to occupy our child? Or can we think of a different way? Can we read a book? Can we share a story? Can we color together? Can we go outside for a walk? There's lots of other ways that we can engage with our child. And then emotional retreats. This is an honest issue. And I think COVID really brought this about for us because parents have been in their homes with their children for hours on end. It's not something that we're accustomed to. Usually we go to work, they go to school or to their, you know, preschool, and then we come back together to enjoy each other in the evening. But when you're with your child, it feels real different, okay? I think there was a lot of lessons learned in that time that we had together. But that emotional retreat of a parent saying, I need 5 minutes to think about adult things, like I cannot build with Legos one more minute. You know, I think this is real for parents, and I think it has been used also as emotional retreat. Now, when we look at the consequences of COVID and the pandemic on for parents, there's several things into play that increase digitalization, more computer time at home, right? Perhaps if they're working from home. That work from home scenario where you're getting emails, you're getting phone calls, you're getting texts. Maybe you're having Zoom calls all day long, right? That is really a consequence of the work environment that we're living in now. And although it's a consequence for us, it's also made an impact on our children. Gig work. Finances have not been the same for a lot of people. Not everyone is privileged enough to work in an environment where they could continue to work from home. So perhaps they had to find another job. Perhaps that's gig work. Perhaps you're doing sales online or you're doing food to go orders. There's lots of different jobs that have been picked up. Perhaps one partner lost their job or one parent lost their job, and then they had to pick up another job where this is going on in the household. Workplace monitoring is a big one. So I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned about what's the difference in working from home and in the workplace, right? How is the productivity? Are we still getting the same amount of work done? I would say yes, in a lot of instances that is happening. But the parents are really trying to keep up with the work pace, right? And last year they were at the peak of this because we couldn't afford to go back to work because what would happen with our child? I have to prove myself that I'm doing what you need me to do as an employer because I don't have a choice right now. So just keeping up with the pace of that workplace monitoring has been significant for families. And also with that workforce, just those blurred lines of work and home, right? It's so easy to log back into your email at 8 o'clock at night. Those are all things to think about. And then the social isolation piece again. reaching out to people when you can't be with them has been significant. And that has also brought us benefits, as we know. I know I often think, like, what could I do? What would I be doing if I couldn't FaceTime my daughter or my grandson? I would be crazy. And so I think we all feel that, and we all needed outlets. But social isolation has also been a consequence, and it's also something that we've had to work into our family life. Consequences of the pandemic for the children: reduced socialization time with peers. And this has brought a lot of consequences, right? Usually they're at school and they have peer-to-peer interaction where they can play, or they're in childcare and they have that peer-to-peer interaction. They have not had that. We're starting to get back to some kind of new normal, I would say. But without that, the children really depended on us to step up to the plate and be that peer. And that's really hard for parents. That's really something that brought a new awareness of what that means for my child, that right now I am also the peer. Reduced outings from home. That's had a lot of consequences, where you used to take your child to a museum or to the theater, or, you know, a indoor trampoline park, or whatever you did with your child. These reduced outings from home have meant more time inside and parents trying to find ways to engage and entertain their children. And so that has meant an increase in digital time and screen time. It's also meant reduced physical activity for the child, where we used to just say, okay, in the backyard, everybody go play, Johnny's coming over. That hasn't been available as much. So that peer time to play outside and run and romp, children just have not had the interest. And there's also been a lot of withholding that kind of activity. So with loss of physical activity, we've also seen some health consequences for our children. We've seen children with weight gain. We've seen children with increased vision issues because of the amount of screen time and like sedentary play that they're engaged in. Again, with the increased screen time, increased stress at home. This has been a big one for everybody. I can't think of a soul that hasn't been touched by it. But when you have parents at home and circumstances have changed financially, socially, in all the ways we can imagine, there's a lot of negotiation that has to go on in the house. And sometimes it's, you know, it's less than optimal. And children are so attuned to us. We talk about the attunement with the adult to the child and us working at that, but children are always attuned to what is happening in their households and with their adults. So I think really monitoring that and trying to figure out ways that the technology and the pandemic have kind of interacted to exacerbate that is important. And then sleep disruption. This is a huge one for families, and technology has not been our friend with this, either for the children or for us. But when we've had less activity and more screen time, whether it's, again, gaming, social media, texting, emailing, these are things that disrupt our sleep patterns. And when our sleep patterns are disrupted, right, we're a little more irritable, we're less at creative thinking, perhaps we're short on patience. All of these factors come together to create things that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about technology and that interplay between our relationship with the children and how this is interacting in our home life. So I'm going to just give you an invitation to reflect with me for a moment. This is me as a baby. This is probably when I stopped liking photos of myself. But whenever I am reflecting or trying to think back to childhood, this is exactly what I do. I do look at a picture of me as a child, and I try to frame that thinking about what is happening now for children and families that's different than what happened for myself or for you guys. I would say on this call, we have multiple generations and we have diverse populations of folks on the call today. I want you to stop and think about, was technology that prevalent in your life? Did you have cell phones? Did you have computers in your home? And how was that managed in the relationship that you had with your parents or your caregivers? Did you feel engaged by the ones who were caring for you? Did you feel secure and attended to? These are important things for us to grasp from where we're coming from and what we're looking at today with children and families. I think it's important in terms of awareness for families, and I think it's important in terms of education for families. And again, it's important for that implicit bias that can always show up at the door with us. Some of the families that we're working with today have never known any different than to have all of this technology be present in their life. And some of us have. And so again, that awareness and education piece is invaluable. So as we're wrapping this up, I think looking at key findings and implications are really important. And with the Technoference, what the research is really telling us is that there's decreased parental sensitivity and responsiveness for the child or the children in our lives. I think it is easy for any of us to become desensitized to how much we're using our technology. I think that it's important to stop, pause, and reflect on how much you are using your technology and over the course of the day and when you're using it. This idea of parental absorption was fascinating to me. Not even as important as the frequency, but how absorbed are you in that technology when you're in it? What is your headspace? And what is happening around you when you are absorbed in that technology? How is that impacting the relationships? Changes the nature of the parental-child relationship. I just think that that's important to think about when we go back and we revisit that slide about serve and return, and we revisit concepts that we've always known to be good and true about eye contact with the child, being on a child's level, being attentive, really thinking how that can easily be altered. And I'm going to leave you with a poem today. Your phone won't feel bad if you don't pay attention to it. It won't care if you haven't played with it for a while. It won't mind if you don't hold it. Your cell phone will be small forever, but your children will not. And so I hope that what you found today is something meaningful that you can take back from this conversation and think about as you frame your work with the children and families that you're working with on a daily basis, and even into your own homes as you are with your partners and your children, living life outside of work. And so I thank you, and I will stop sharing now. And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts or reflections about any of the conversation today that I could perhaps help with. I see there's some things coming in the chat. Say yes, powerful. So some links have been dropped in the chat for you guys, for everyone, about the references. Reminds me of that song, Cats in the Cradle. Oh my gosh, yes. I did not think about that, but yes. Yeah, so I hope it was powerful. I hope it is something that we can take back and, you know, frame awareness for our children and families we're working with, and the educational piece. There is, oh gosh, I think I might have ended you guys too soon. Let me see if I can, there is a slide here. Let me see if I can share it.
It's okay, Tracy, if you
sorry,
can't.
Dana,
You're welcome.
I forgot to show the.
That's okay. You can talk people through the last couple slides, and then I'll wrap up and talk about the certificate. So it's okay if you can't reshare.
Yeah, I think really all that was left is just to get your thoughts and reflections you know, about what you heard today. If this is something that you're seeing in the environments, you know, that you're working in with children and families, I would just love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, Tracy, I was thinking I would love to hear what's the nugget of information people might take today to share with families, because I know we're going to talk about that some more next time, some more strategies for how to share this information and kind of enter into the conversation with families when they either ask about technology use or, you know, hopefully they've brought it up, but if it's something that comes up during your visits that people think about. So you feel free to type that into chat if there's a piece of this that you think, okay, I want to think about that some more with the families I work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm looking back.
Thanks, Felicia.
Yeah, there's some nice compliments going on in there, Tracy. I'm looking back through the chat. I don't think you missed anybody's questions, which is great. If anybody has questions, feel free to type them into chat. I don't know, Tracy, do you want to give them a little preview of next time, what we're going to do in December?
Yeah, so next time we're really going to be doing a deeper dive into strategies that you can actually use with families to kind of frame that conversation, right? Because this is not an easy conversation to have with families. So we'll be talking about strategies that can use. We'll also be looking at it through like a reflective practice lens, just in how we can reflect with families and use that practice to really use it as a teaching tool and help parents think through what is happening in their relationship with the child as it relates to technology. And then also some just like great conversation starters. You know, conversation starters are really critical when we are talking about how do you even enter into that conversation. Can be awkward, right? Because let's say you've been in this home many, many times and you've seen technology use or it's come up. And then, you know, this visit, we're gonna talk about it. So just conversation starters. And then we're gonna also hear the children's voice on this. So we've got some really interesting things coming up with the child's voice and what it sounds like in response to this. Also early interventionist voice and parents' voice. So it's really, I think, going to be a great wrap up to the conversation. And I hope that you guys will have time to really mull it over between now and December and just thinking about you know, ways that we can be approaching families, and then hope that the second conversation is just really going to add to what you know already about getting engaged with your families.
Thanks, Tracy.